The hype is in the air, many people excited without where, people tweeting away with so much glee, you must think someone's giving away stuff for free. Buzzwords are thrown around, if only the truth can be found. It's Christmas for the internet hype machine, oh how the games look so pristine. And now it's time for those Grinches like me to come out and spoil the fun. Oh how skeptical you'll be after I'm done. No, I'm not gonna rhyme this whole time. That was unintentional. Well, I got stuff to do, so I can't rhyme this whole thing. E3 this year was about catering towards the community, at least for everyone except for Sony. After last year's gaudy, bombastic presentation, the focus has gone to including more people into gaming. Microsoft doubled down on including more people into their Xbox ecosystem, showing off that all Microsoft Studio productions will be eligible for cross-buying, meaning you buy it on Xbox One and get it also on PC. They seem to be offering more ways for people to play their games and are taking shots at those who are not allowing it to be so.
Rocket League recently enabled this across all of the networks that allow it.
Microsoft really pushed their Xbox exclusives to Windows 10. I mean, really. It's the point I was actually tired of hearing this.
Xbox One and Windows 10 exclusive.
I know already, come on, gosh, yeah. EA is launching new events and tournaments for its almost fragmented player base. It seems like it has so many different types of fans. If you look at the Twitch chat when that was going on, when they were showing off the sports part, there's a whole contingent of sports fans that were really happy to see all that stuff, and then there was a majority of people I wasn't really too interested in it, but I do see the value in it. But yes, there's people who really like Mass Effect and people who don't really care for Mass Effect, people who like Star Wars and people who don't really care for Star Wars, and people who were like, oh, Battlefield's amazing, and then people who just like, okay, it looks alright. EA also moved away from E3 main space hosting. Their EA Play event for the fans, when in all actuality they probably want personalities to come in and play their games first and not have to deal with a slew of all of the other announcements associated with E3. Esports Bait was announced by Bethesda, and a response to Doom's lackluster multiplayer. Even Aisha Tyler and Ubisoft have noticed how much of a cringeworthy meme they have become.
Like, why do I continue to do this conference in the face of the overwhelming internet love that I receive? And it's not the money.
And they've doubled down on more controlled cringe. I wouldn't say their event was cringeworthy, but a lot of people say that this part was very cringeworthy. For me, what was cringeworthy was going from this to this.
I want to take a moment to do something that's going to feel a little incongruous and potentially even uncomfortable for some of you. There's no smooth or easy way to do this, but we all felt really strongly when we were rehearsing today that we needed to say this. So before we start, everyone here at Ubisoft want to offer our deepest sympathies to the people affected by this weekend's tragedy in Orlando.
The only people who didn't really acknowledge this was EA, and that kind of makes them seem even more like a big jerk. People say they see that as something that gaming should acknowledge, but I don't know really if that should be a thing. The funny thing is that the conference, the fans who were most catered towards in EA, Microsoft, and Bethesda's conferences, even Nintendo's, threw down their armchair cups and really got overly excited for Sony's press conference, which was basically a big ornate ad to the fans saying, pre-order these games now. I mean, the thing is that the biggest hype-worthy parts of the conferences are the most talked about games, which Sony's press conference had. This year, big multi-billion-dollar corporations focused on games and the fans that play them. More vertical slice gameplays were shown off than the usual CGI blur trailer that tells us nothing about whether the game is going to play well or not. Smaller titles shared space with huge blockbusters. Well, everything that wasn't PlayStation VR was pretty cool. VR was actually demoed on the main stage. PlayStation VR wasn't really demoed. They just said, hey, we had 50 games coming out on PlayStation VR. PlayStation VR, I'm really skeptical for it. So you're saying that my PlayStation is going to be able to run this whole game, right? how it is, when it's already pushing itself to its limit just to put out an image on its own. I know that the PlayStation VR is supposed to come out with a separate image thing, but that's just to put up an image onto the television. I don't know, I'm really highly skeptical about PlayStation VR. That and the Samsung Gear VR are the most accessible VR accessories for people, and I don't know if VR is to be a thing. Maybe. I'm just hugely skeptical about these vertical slices that game devs are showing off that are supposed to show off what mid-level to late-level gameplay is supposed to look like. But typically, when you get the game, it's missing features that were shown off or doesn't look as great. Or it might not even be actual gameplay. I'm looking at you, Ubisoft. I'm looking at you. Yeah, I know. So anyways, I think you guys just wanted me to talk about the video games that were shown off, but not all of them because there is way too many. So here we go. So I wasn't really watching the Ubisoft conference at the time, so when people were really excited about this game, I was really intrigued. For those who don't know, Steep is a new genre. It's a open world extreme sports game that doesn't really look too extreme. I mean, the mechanics of what they showed off look pretty solid and could be fun for a day or two, but could get boring after a while. I actually applaud Ubisoft for trying something new, but I could totally see if this gets popular, get exploited for DLC. New Steep DLC Climb the Himalayas available now for $20. Also, I think that they showed off that you could pretty much teleport and do whatever on the map, but they kind of want you to climb up a mountain and stuff. I wish there wasn't teleportation in it, because if you were to teleport to the top of a mountain and just ski off of it, it's not as impressive as if you had to climb from the base all the way to the top and then ski down it. But that's just me. It just makes me really want to play SSX. Oh boy, this looks crazy. Dead Rising is actually at its best when it's crazy, especially as a lens to see how Japan sees America. So, I mean, Dead Rising, it never really gets old, so I'm kind of interested. So this game actually makes me want to play SOCOM or Rainbow Six more than it actually wants me to play Ghost Recon or Wildlands. A lot of these open world games look good on paper, but in all reality, they don't play out the same way by not really giving enough variety or interesting gameplay. When a game goes open world, typically they lose the focus, which is not something you really want for a tactical shooter. It seems to be taking a Metal Gear Solid 5's gameplay and controls even and put it in a multiplayer setting. I really wonder what would happen if you didn't have professional voice actors as your friends and you tried to play this by yourself. Are you gonna have AI buddies or what? They said you could play it single player, but I don't think it would be as fun. Then again, you know, if it's funnier with your friends, then yeah, it's funnier with your friends. If anything's funnier with your friends because they're your friends for that reason. If the game's not fun by yourself, then it makes me really skeptical. This game seems like it's gonna fall prey to the same problems MGS5 had, but it still is gonna be relatively popular, I assume. Terrible name, cool aesthetics. The less I see of this game would be better. Kinda wish it wasn't open world though, but it could be cool. It's made by Killzone people. Killzone games were cool. I never played any of them, but they seemed cool at the time. This one isn't gonna be too bad, so I just kinda wish it wasn't open world. So id Software really seems that they want to bring back the 90s, and that's okay if it stayed unique. Apparently, Quake Champions is going to be Bethesda's esport. The thing is that they're trying to put new design elements like loadouts and hero characters, and these aspects aren't inherently bad, but if you look back at Doom's multiplayer, the parts that make up Doom's multiplayer aren't specifically bad, but when you put them together and to a gameplay that kind of leans itself towards the old school, having loadouts and hero characters is not something you want, because there's a bunch of other games you can play for that. You can play Overwatch, you can play Call of Duty if you want loadout, or Battlefield for loadouts and stuff. For me, Quake is like about bunny hopping and really high output weapons that do a lot of damage that you have to pick up off the ground, but loadouts are something you need in esports. I don't know. I'm kind of highly skeptical. I mean, it's nice that it's on PC only. I don't know. Too bad for console peasants. So this game really intrigued me when it was announced last year. It could be a more accessible Chivalry. From what I've heard from people who've actually played it, that the actually is more complicated than it seems from the trailers. And the single player could be good practice for multiplayer. It's just basically a bot match, but it looks really cool. I've actually been looking at historical European martial arts, HEMA for short, and to see some of those tactics used in the gameplay of this game is pretty awesome, in my opinion. So it looks historically accurate, kind of as historically accurate as Vikings versus Samurai are, but I kind of wonder how much legs it has, how much depth it has, if it would last. So I'm probably gonna wait to try it out.
Resident Evil.
Now it seems that the internet is kind of divided about this one. Well, first of all, this is the half of the people are really excited to play basically PT again, and the other half are I kind of wanted another Resident Evil game. But to me, I mean, well, first of all, this is the same Resident Evil series, which you had to fight a monster dude on top of a volcano and have a full-out war in the streets of China in the last two entries. The latter making it clear that the series was in dire need of a reboot. And now here comes Resident Evil 7. Inevitable comparisons to PT are inevitable, but somehow this demo shows a change in focus. When the series first started, it defined survival horror that kind of got stale, and people were fed up with the tank controls. Then RE4 came out, not only redefined survival horror, but the predecessor for the modern action game, which kind of makes me frustrated when people get angry about any new direction the franchise makes, or any new direction any franchise makes. Though the difference here is that RE1, RE4, and RE7 is that Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 4 were trailblazers. It was very unique gameplay for the time that you couldn't really get anywhere else. The gameplay was unique and set a precedent for future games. Resident Evil 7 clearly takes inspiration from PT, maybe because of the fact that Capcom hired some of the PT staff. The progression of the series slowly made for more and more enemy interaction to the point that it felt more like a Gears of War / modern military shooter clone. RE7 goes back to the combat level that's lower than that of RE1 probably. I'm speculating. Anyways, this game is worth a whole other video, so I think that's what I'll do. Oh boy, the Ubisoft promises are in full swing this time. When the first Watch Dogs came out, it promised the stars, and what was delivered was more like your neighbor Joe. You know, he's a nice guy and all, but there's nothing really special about him. But this one seems to have more personality. I mean, look at this guy. I remember that. That looks cool. This guy is more memorable than all of Watch Dogs 1. The conceit of Watch Dogs 2 is cool and energetic. A parkour system would be a very interesting system. I'm getting very heavy Mr. Robot vibes off of this, which is really great because that show is pretty awesome. The thing is that it really boils down to whether the missions are well designed to have a three-pronged approach or not. The three-pronged approach being where you could either stealth your way, hack your way, or shoot your way through. The thing is that I don't really like the shoot your way idea as being an option. I mean, it's cool and all that when you're shooting the mob in the last game, but random security guards in the middle of the city, not so much. Just when you could pull out your machine gun at any time, why would you sneak through a place? I hope there's an incentive to be stealthy or hacky. Maybe I'll have a killer soundtrack to listen to at the very least. I just wanted to mention this one because I really think that the reason Trey Parker and Matt Stone named it what they named it is so that they could laugh every time somebody said it. Anyways, they've revamped the combat to be grid-based and it looks very much like XCOM-ish, kinda. Which is cool and all, but the reason why I like Stick of the Truth was it wasn't too long, it wasn't too complicated. So I hope that it's not really that complicated, it doesn't stay too long. I like that they're making fun of Marvel though, which is great. Survival. Survive. No, not again. Not open world. Zombies. Zombies. No. Oh, at least there's some interesting physics there. Now, why is he carrying so much ammo? I'm a sci-fi nerd, so this was pretty awesome. I mean, you get to fly a spaceship. You couldn't even do that in the last Star Wars game. Out in outer space, at least. I've always been one of the only people that I know to play Call of Duty for the single player, so this is kind of awkward because most of the people are hating the multiplayer that they really haven't shown off yet. And it's clear that the franchise multiplayer has been leaning more towards a MOBA style, all-inclusive multiplayer style. Everyone gets kills, and it's a little less about skill and more about where you stand at a certain time. But man, the single player looks pretty awesome, I would have to say myself, because it looks like you get a lot of places to go, looks a lot more open, and I'm all for it. It looks like there's a lot of things going on under its hood. I really hope that this gameplay is representative of the final product, but typically Call of Duty doesn't really, the gameplay that they show off, that they don't really undersell or they don't really mess it up and overpromise. What they show off is typically what is in the game. So I'm kinda anticipating this. I'm sorry. Please don't hurt me. Oh boy, it's the Coke and Pepsi wars all over again. Seems that people get really decisive over stuff. And anyways, there's a lot of hype behind this one, and I don't know, because the single player has potential to be great edutainment. Think about it. I mean, you can learn all about the British's plan to mess up the Turks by uniting the Arabs against the Turks. Basically Lawrence of Arabia, the video game, or maybe jump around major battles around the world. The multiplayer is where all the hype is though, and it's not as unique as the setting. They had the opportunity to make a slow-paced, tense multiplayer game that was more about group-based combat instead of one-on-one combat that was historically accurate, but you're running around with machine guns that weren't very common and didn't really exist until the last year of the war. I just wish that it was more unique. I don't know, it looks like a normal Battlefield game with a World War I skin. I think I just have to try it out during the open beta. Also, your name sucks.
Open your eyes.
So it turns out this is the most hyped game of E3, and that's pretty good for Nintendo, right? I mean, I guess that's good for Nintendo. Have two games and have them to be highly anticipated sequels to games with an ardent fan base. The game itself looks pretty cool. It's an open world thing that I'm worried about is that it's going to lose its focus and not be very detailed and interesting, kind of how MGS5 and Mirror's Edge was like the newest Mirror's Edge. I kind of hope that it works out for Nintendo and the NX version of this is baller enough for them to want to buy it on that version. I don't know, I don't have a Wii U, so this is kind of awkward. Also, I heard that it's kind of like Dark Souls, and I like Dark Souls, so I'm all for Dark Souls and more games. So people have this bizarre idea that someone can win E3 like it's some kind of reality TV show or something. Everybody knows that Sony's press conference is awesome. I mean, how do you not like a live orchestra? But Sony generates hype year after year by not really shaking things up. By just putting their head down and showing off stuff that people want, they don't really try to innovate and put out features that would bring more people into gaming. I find E3 weird for the most part. What started off as a conference for investors to learn about what each game company and was up to and where to spend their money has actually blown up into be this big hype machine for both investors and consumers. And that kind of really hasn't changed. Praising these multi-billion-dollar companies and blindly following them, even though in recent memory they've all messed up big time, it doesn't matter how well each company does at E3 because they're still gonna make boatloads no matter what. E3 brings their stocks up. It makes investors more confident in their ability to sell games. Praising E3 press conferences is like praising Super Bowl commercials. Oh, wait, we already do that. The thing is that we live in a time and age that no one can say they played all of the interesting and unique games that are out there. People like to say that games were better back then. Well, that's kind of true because game development was very expensive and only those who were really invested in the business of making games made games at the time. And now games are dime a dozen, which is great for a consumer because that same $60 that you would buy a major AAA release before you even get the game, you could purchase at least 3 interesting and new games. Your dollar even could stretch even further. I'm not saying that I don't get optimistic for really cool games. I'm just saying wait, don't pre-order to get their throwaway packs of DLC and wait to see when the game comes out, whether it's worth it or not. This way, the straight up lies that they're trying to put out on us doesn't help them. They could actually be more honest. The hype machine is probably the most destructive part of the gaming industry, which is why you shouldn't watch this stuff. It sets expectation high that aren't really gonna get met and inevitably disappoints. And the stuff that's really awesome, I would rather have had that experience for the first time playing the game, which is why the only winning move in the E3 hype machine is not to play. Well, what do I know? I'm just a sponge.